So to start, my family history is very tragic. My parents got into a serious car accident when I was a little kid, and my dad passed away in the hospital from his injuries. My mom had lasting injuries that still affect her, making it difficult for her to walk. My dad left us the house that my mom and I continued to live in for many years to come. Eventually, my mom started seeing someone when I was around 10, so she'd be out of the house quite often. My Uncle Steve would often stay at the house for days at a time while she was gone, and I got really close with him. He was my babysitter of sorts for a long time. He was always a cool uncle. He'd play catch with me in the yard. He'd take care of our pets. He'd take me to the movies. Stuff like that any kid needs. Memories I didn't get to form with my dad. Unfortunately, as the years went on and I got older, my mom got married to her second husband, and my Uncle Steve would come around less and less. By the time I was 16, there was a period where he just didn't come over for months, and I didn't hear from him. My mom was comfortable leaving me home alone at this point, so I didn't question it too much, and having the house to myself was always nice as a teenager. My mom would be home a couple nights a week for dinner, but for the most part she lived with her husband. My mom was always very vague about what happened to my Uncle Steve. I had my suspicions that he was sick, or dead though. It may sound weird that my mom would hide something like that from me, but if you met my mom you'd get it instantly. Because of what she went through, I think it made her a much more compassionate person that doesn't want to cause any kind of stress or grief toward another person. By the time I turned 18, I was a legal adult and the house was basically mine. My mom would visit occasionally, but she and her husband had already gotten another house together. As an 18-year-old guy having a house to myself, you could imagine that I wasn't complaining. Yes, I'd have friends over for late nights. Yes, I'd have girls over. And yes, I'd often not pick things up off the floor for days at a time. I would miss my Uncle Steve though, as he was the father figure that I grew up with. And there were times where being in a big empty house by myself at such a young age was kind of lonely and depressing. I would numb this feeling often by, I guess, doing the things I just mentioned. I still had my dog Jojo, the only other life in the house really. He was an Australian shepherd, and at the time of this story, he was 13 years old. He was an old man. He always slept by my side in bed. But one night in January, I remember this because the Christmas tree was still up. I woke up and Jojo wasn't in bed. I got up, thinking he was downstairs somewhere and he had to go to the bathroom. I called his name as I walked down the stairs. I didn't hear him, so I walked to the kitchen where the basement stairs and back door were, and I saw him in the dark. He was staring, intently, down the basement stairs. I usually left that door open because it was all at a close. He only moved when he turned his head to look at me for a second, but then he looked right back down the stairs. I stepped to the edge of the stairs and then looked at Jojo and said, "What is it, boy?" His tail started wagging just a bit for a second, then went stiff again. I flicked on the light in the basement and looked down the stairs. Jojo inched closer but didn't bark. I felt a cold shiver run down me as I looked down into the basement. Of all places for your dog to stare down like this, the basement is the worst place. I turned off the light and grabbed Jojo by the collar to bring him upstairs. I shut the door so he couldn't leave again. Was I creeped out? Yes, a little. It was unusual behavior for him. I was mainly asking myself what he could have heard. I tried to go back to sleep. At this point, my mind was kind of racing though, and it didn't help that every few minutes or so I would hear and feel the vibration on the bed as Jojo would look up at the doorway, as if still hearing something from downstairs. I decided I would investigate. I wasn't going to be a mama's boy and text my mom at whatever off hour in the night it was, telling her I'm scared. Part of not having a father figure in the house when you're young is becoming a man early on. I went downstairs again, and by the time I was at the bottom, I heard Jojo walking down following me. Jojo then caught up to me and went straight for the basement door again. Then, he stopped, in the same position as last time. I stopped alongside him and looked down the stairs into the darkness again. I can't believe I did this, but I called down the stairs saying, "Is someone there?" I flicked on the light when there was no response. I started walking down the steps, each one creaking beneath me. I hated those old steps. You couldn't see into the basement until you were about halfway down the stairs as the ceiling was low. I was on maybe the third step when I heard the voice. It was my uncle's voice. I knew it right away, all these years later. It was my uncle's voice from somewhere in the basement saying my name. Only it sounded weak, like he was injured. I ran down to the basement as my heart dropped out of me. I got to the bottom and it was just an empty basement. "Uncle Steve," I called out. Jojo was still at the top of the stairs looking down at me. He didn't want to come down. I walked further into the basement and there was nobody there. My heart was beating 100 beats per minute at this moment. I peeked behind the couch and even behind the TV. There was nowhere else for anyone to be besides the laundry room, which was in the corner. I took one look into the corner and I thought I heard the slightest sound on the other side of the door. That's when something just came over my entire body where I had to sprint upstairs like a little kid and get out of there. When I got to the top step, I didn't even shut the light. I struggled to just close the basement door and then run upstairs. Poor old Jojo barked, the first barks I'd heard from him in months. He followed behind as fast as he could as I went upstairs. This is where she paused for a second, and it's because this was the moment she decided to tell me the truth. That my Uncle Steve got sick with cancer and died years ago, and that's why he stopped coming over. Before she could finish her explanation, I told her, "It's not possible. He's down in the basement right now." She then stopped me and said, "Listen to me. If someone's in the basement, you need to call the cops right now." So that's what I did. I hung up, dialed 911, and told them of a break-in. Jojo and I waited in my bedroom until there was a knock at the front door, followed by the doorbell. I ran downstairs to let them in and eagerly pointed them to the basement. The basement door was still basically jammed shut like I left it. They told me to wait up there, but I didn't listen. I insisted on going down with them. I reenacted everything as we went down, what I heard, when, and where. Then I showed them where I looked around. And then I pointed to the one spot I didn't check, the laundry room, where I heard the sound. They went to open the door, and I showed them the light switch. When the light turned on, there was no one inside. The laundry room looked how it always looked. There was no one hiding in any secret crevices or behind the machines. Nothing. It was as void of people as could be before we came in. I knew I was looking crazy right about now. We went back upstairs and they did a little search of the first floor as well, then the upstairs. The house was as clear as it could be. There was no one there. They were at least pretty level-headed and not demeaning about it, even though they probably thought I was a whack job. They left and I went back upstairs to call my mom again. She picked up right away and this is where she finished explaining. My Uncle Steve died years ago, but she didn't want to tell me because she knew I suffered enough loss and she couldn't bring herself to tell me. So, she just played it off like my uncle kind of disappeared, which I yelled at her was infinitely worse. But that also didn't explain my hearing his voice just now in the basement. I calmed down and then said into the phone, "Mom, I'm scared." She believed what I heard, I know it, and that scared me even more. She tried to convince me everything would be all right and that my brain was playing tricks on me. I pretended to agree. We hung up and I pulled Jojo close to me. He was the only thing keeping me from freaking out of my skin that night. I didn't fall asleep for another few hours. For a whole week after that, life in that house was hell. I couldn't go anywhere near that basement door. Jojo wouldn't stare at it anymore, but it was still haunting. I know it was all real because Jojo was reacting to something. Had Jojo not been there, I could have played it off as a late-night hallucination or mind tricks. But no, someone, or something, was down there. Something that had my uncle's voice. My mom sold that house just a year later.